Okay, we just have a couple more minutes again. I was just encouraging everyone, grab a notebook, grab some water, your tea, coffee, whatever it is that you drink in the afternoon. Get comfortable, clear your mind. If you're an essential oil user, now's a good time for a little bit of clarity, maybe a little white angelica. Um, these are essential oils that just are very calming and help the body and the mind really focus and hear. Right. So I'm going to be on time, which means, right, a little bit early for some of your personalities. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Mary Starr Carter, Dr. Mary Starr Carter. I'm known as the Total Wellness Doc and Mom, and it's my privilege to be here having this casual conversation with my amazing friend, Isa Agape. Um, if we have never met before, I want to just introduce myself because I know Isa has a whole bunch of friends and clients here, and I have some friends and clients here. I just want to introduce myself. It was over 2 decades ago that I was in a very deep, dark place in my life. And I truly believe God opened a door in my life that time. I was in chiropractic school. I was actually failing out of school. My parents were going through a very difficult divorce at the time. And I do believe God opened a door for me, and He opened a door into natural wellness. And my grief, understanding grief from a practitioner or chiropractor sense is back in school. I remember this story. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to share a couple little stories with you and then introduce Isa and start a conversation. So back in chiropractic school, I was very much into understanding that the body was more than just bones and ligaments and muscles, and that wellness truly was total wellness. And I remember this first story of hearing this woman. She was 10 months pregnant, happily married, and her husband tragically died in a car accident.
Mm.
And she went into labor, like literally within hours of his death, had the baby, and had to make things work, right? She had to go back to work. She never had the ability to process her grief. 10 years later, she finds herself in her career. She was a nurse. She had horrific psoriasis. It's a skin kind of condition, a lot of pain, muscles, joints, all of that. And I was at this holistic health seminar, and this woman was sharing her story and showing how she no longer had the psoriasis. And what had happened through this type of healing work is that she realized she had never processed the grief, so her body decided to process it. Now, when I heard that story, and I learned that in 6 months she had healed her psoriasis, I thought, this is crazy. This can't be. But then I actually got into practice, and client after client, Isa, I don't even know if I've told you all these stories, but client after client after client, you know, would come in. I remember my great uncle, his wife had had Alzheimer's for many, many years, and she had died, and it was about 3 months. And he kind of came in, he was very decrepit and, just leaning over. And I use this type of massage with essential oils. And we used a certain essential oil on him. And I kid you not, he got off that table. His shoulders were back. There was a smile on his face for like the first time. It was like so much grief had come off of him. And he called my grandmother the next day. He said, I slept for the first time all the way from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. for the first time in like over a decade. He always was up in the middle of the night, always was up in the middle of the night. And story after story after story of individual where grief, I believe, from a practitioner's perspective,
Mm.
um, was directly affecting their health. And I think that's, if it goes unresolved, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today, I think that that can be a main contributor to dis-ease.
Mm.
Disease. So now, where does Isa come in and all this? So, as a lot of you know, I am a chiropractor. I'm a different type of chiropractor. I spend probably over an hour with each patient. I use massage and premium essential oils, and I work on the muscles and all of those things. And Isa and I story started well over a decade, like 2007 or so, when we first met,
Yeah.
you know. And I remember, Isa, like when you and I first got close, you were going through a really hard thing. Well, let me introduce you first, right? And you share a little bit
Sure.
too. Okay, so Isa Agape, if you don't know Isa, she is a such a treasure. She's an international musician, artist, photographer. I have some beautiful pictures taken by her there in the redwood forest with my family. She is a composer, an artist. She just truly is a gift. But for any of you who know Isa personally, she just makes you feel amazing, really amazing. She's such an caring friend, a great listener. She feels very deeply. She's just an incredible person. But the Isa we have today is not necessarily the Isa that I first met. Okay, I can say it, right?
Yes.
The Isa
Yeah.
we have today is not necessarily the Isa we have first met. So share a little bit about your backstory, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about the incident with your spiritual mom. And I remember working on you and how bad your muscles were and how much pain you were in.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I'm really honored to just be here and seeing everyone kind of come into the conversation here. It's overwhelming. And I take doing this very seriously, and I've talked to um a few friends about it, and just to make sure that I communicate clearly. And but a little bit about me. I'm, as Mary said, I'm a singer songwriter, composer, music producer. um Currently writing music for media, film, TV, commercials, stuff like that. Before all of that, I grew up in Philly. Grew up in the church, and the church I grew up in was very, just to give you a little background of my how I grew up. Very, very. It was a Pentecostal church, very strict. I couldn't wear skirts. Uh, went to a Janet Jackson concert, and got in trouble for doing that. So it was very. I grew up kind of in a very like religious environment. Um, I went to college in New York, and my senior year of college, my mom had a stroke, and she passed away February 18th, 2002. So that was kind of crazy. Um, Probably the biggest loss in my family, next to my uncle. When I think about just like, when was the first major loss in my life, I would say my uncle, my dad's brother, and then the second was my mom. And so I was, I was a mess. Didn't know, losing a parent at any age is devastating, and so I didn't really know how to cope, how to even process, because there was a lot of things involved with that, and my dad wasn't around. How to even process. I'm hearing echo. Okay, it's gone. And so yeah, I guess a few years after my mom passed, that's when I met you, Mary. And I probably was very depressed and very hard shelled, a lot of walls. And yeah, so it was definitely a hard several years. And obviously life goes on, and so you things happen, and they get harder and harder and whatever, and more losses here and there and more trauma, and so what ends up happening is you deal with one trauma, and then you have another one, and it just compounds and compounds and compounds and becomes this like mounting, like Mount Everest, like this just mountain of grief. And so yeah, so I
Isa,
think that's, yeah, I met you. I met you shortly after my mom passed.
take us back a little bit, because knowing a little bit more about your life and stuff, you graduate college and then you
Yep.
went over at IHOP.
Yeah.
Right? So tell them what IHOP is, and then your career actually starts to explode. And I always wanted to ask you this. Do you think because of what you went through, like, did that come through your music? Like, I mean, you became really well known very, very quickly. Share a little bit about that.
Yeah, after I graduated from college, I went to college in New York, and that year I met the founder of the International House of Prayer in Kansas City. His name is Mike Bickle, and I was at the time leading a short set, and he came up to me and invited me to come out. I went out to Kansas City for a conference. It was like a worship church conference with music and speaking, and I went and felt like it was a good spot for me to go after graduating. Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and so I went to Kansas City, spent about 2 years there. In that 2 years, I started writing music, and I wrote a song called Rend the Heavens, and that song kind of blew up a bit, and it kind of, I mean, I would say, I mean, if you're asking if, the things that I've gone through in life, if it's contributed to my writing, I would say absolutely. In a lot of ways it has, for sure. And so, yeah, I spent some time in the International House of Prayer, just so that people know what it is. It's just 24-hour worship and prayer. And so it's music accompanied with prayer. And so it's like 24 hours nonstop. And so I did that for about 2.5 years. And then I went to work for a company, online company in California called DannyJohnson.com. And that's where I met my spiritual mom, Danny Johnson.
So we meet 2007.
Yeah.
And you're a nice person, but there is just like this wall around you, there's this wall around you. So, and you were still singing sets at some of the conferences and playing music, writing music, right? At that time.
Yeah.
Stuff too. And so you meet your spiritual mom, Danny, and how is that like, because people who've gone through grief and lost someone like their own mother, like, was it difficult for you to even let her in? I mean, and you guys have a video that you did together that's beautiful too.
Yeah.
Your story, but
yeah, I mean, it was, I was very distrusting of people in the church. Honestly, I was gone through some interesting things there, and so when I met her, she kind of struck me as just different, but like I was kind of like, I don't know what you're about. You're different, but I don't know what you're about. So I'm gonna like kind of keep you at an arm's distance and just kind of feel you out here a bit. So yeah, I definitely had still had my walls for sure. I mean, she broke through eventually, but and I kind of let her, and I started going through some just processing and healing too from the things that I've gone through up until that point in my life. And so yeah.
And you became a funner. You became, you know, all that. And like you
More
said,
enjoyable to be around.
more enjoyable. Like you did. And then this other trauma happens now with your spiritual mom, and your spiritual mom has major back issues, failed back surgery, is paralyzed from the waist down. You're having to help with the 24-hour care. And that's kind of where we met. And tell me about what was going through your mind, because I know when I would put my hands on you to adjust you or give you a massage, I mean, your body was just a mess.
Yeah.
Like, can you process or even think back then?
Yeah, I mean, when Danny got sick and couldn't, like, went to surgery, got out of surgery, couldn't walk. The point of the surgery was to fix her, and that didn't happen. It was, for me, it was kind of like, oh no, this is happening again. Because my mom, when she got sick, she went into surgery. She went into the hospital for a blood clot in her lower extremities. So she went into surgery so they could clear that and fix that. It was like a 13-14 hour surgery. It was very intense and just crazy long. She came out of surgery, and things were not looking very good. And I probably, like, 48 hours later, we had to make a decision about amputating her leg. And my dad wasn't there. And so it was the burden of the decision was between me and my older brother. My older brother was a mess, so he couldn't do it. So I kind of had to make the decision. And I said, yeah, waited to the very last minute because I really wanted God to kind of come through and heal her. And the doctor called and was just like, we need to make a decision, like, right now. We need to amputate her leg or she will die. And so, and she hadn't been conscious, so she didn't have any clue of what was happening. And so I had to make the call, and I did. And they amputated her leg. And so when, fast forward to the stuff that's happening with Danny, like it just felt like, oh my gosh, this is like, it's all over again. And it happened around the same time. Danny went into the hospital December 21st. This is the same day that my mom went into the hospital, was December 21st. Danny got healed, like fully healed, like in terms of like walking. I think it was like February 8th of the following year. And my mom passed away February 18th. So it was all very, like, there was just too many things happening that made me obviously go back to that trauma. And I clearly hadn't dealt with it. As working on my body, you could feel it on my body. And so it felt very like, just devastating again.
So what's interesting about this story, and I think for individuals who've ever been through something traumatic with a loved one, whether they've passed, and it's happened again. My own husband had a terrible bicycle accident, was in the hospital 21 days in a hospital bed in our house, and he got better. Right. He got better. He got fully functioning after a year, he got better. But when he gets sick now, or he's like, it kind of like comes back to you and you just feel it in your body, like, this is going to happen again. So I remember Danny was better. I mean, besides a little bit of muscle weakness, she was better. And all of us are rejoicing and just praising God for this miracle that happened. But you weren't better. Like, you like you could see it on you, I could feel it on you, like there was just so much going on for you, like you had to take a little vacation or something after that.
Yeah, I booked the flight to Hawaii to get some help, because there were so many things that happened during that, what was it, 4 months, 3.5 months, that was way too familiar. And I remember Danny looking at me and saying, you have to deal with this trauma, and encouraging me to go to Hawaii. And so I went, and I spent, I don't know, 3 weeks out there, to deal with some of it. And I say some of it because there was still obviously a lot more that I needed to deal with.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, now I'm kind of remembering back too because one of your friends, Erica, had an aneurysm, like right in November, back to back, and then Danny has this, and it just
Mhm.
it was one thing right after the other.
Yeah.
That was awful. So there's a lot of people who go through that, and whether they're busy in their careers, they're busy parents, they forget of the after. And then I can take it to miscarriages. I've had 6 miscarriages myself, and and I think of what my physical body goes through, but also my husband. And we've
Mhm.
had multiple conversations, and it's very interesting, like same times in the year, he'll get very run down, it, and he talks about it. He's like, you deal with it one way, I've not dealt with it.
Mm.
Like how these little big griefs in our lives can affect us years later if we don't deal with them, recover with them.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's not just, and I'm gonna say this disclaimer. I'm not a not a psychiatrist. I'm not certified in, we're gonna talk about, the thing that I use to really help me walk through a lot of my trauma. It's called grief recovery. I'm not certified in grief recovery, but I'm speaking purely out of my experience, with it. And there are some things that I learned about, grief, and it's not just losing a loved one, or going through divorce, there's probably there's about, this is what I learned when I went through grief recovery, that there's over 40 life events that cause grief. Over
Wow.
40 life events that cause grief.
Well,
So I'm gonna just shoot out a few. So it's death of a loved one, which we've talked about, breakups, retirement, divorce, personal illness and injury, bankruptcy, moving or changing job or schools, miscarriage, pregnancy, and birth, death of a less than loved one, meaning someone that you can care about or don't care about, and they die, emptiness, and loss of trust or safety. So those are just a few. And so,
getting fired,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Loss of a
yeah,
pet.
yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
People rebelling children.
Hmm.
Um, I it's interesting you talk about retirement, right? Everyone, oh yay, I'm retired.
Yeah,
I retire.
yeah. Yeah.
And even for parents, I know, especially for women who make that decision to come home and raise their kids and not work
Hmm.
anymore, there's a
Hmm.
huge loss with that
Yeah,
too.
yeah, for sure. And yeah, it's crazy. So when I heard that, I was just like, oh my goodness. And when you're going through grief recovery, and one of the things that you go through is you have to, you write out kind of like a a life map kind of a graph. And you'd be surprised the things that were the thing that was more shocking or more like that. When I did my graph, there were certain things that I was just like, oh yeah. And then there were certain things that I was like, wow, that really did deeply affect me. And it was like the one that affected me was the most emotionally, at the time when I was doing my graph was when I gave my dog. I had a black lab, and I gave my dog to a grieving family. They had just lost their father in the fire. He was a firefighter, and he died during right before Christmas, and I couldn't take care of the dog because I had just had major surgery, and it felt like I gave the dog away, and I didn't realize how deeply that affected me until I did my graph. And so so it's interesting what your body reacts to. So yeah.
Not knowing that. Some people here said, I experienced loss of identity when I no longer was an airman in the Air Force. And again, after my husband retired and we're no longer active duty. That's really I'm starting to feel I grieve my former self as I heal. As none of us cannot go through these things. It affects us all. It's life, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
And the body does remember.
And the interesting thing about, yes, we all go through these things is, but no one teaches us. Like, it's
Yeah.
not something we learn in school. I don't think
No.
it's something we really learn in church at all.
No.
Or our parents teach us how to do this.
Yeah.
Like, so then we end up in our late teens, early 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s with kind of all this junk in the trunk. Does anybody agree with that? Or
Yeah, it's compound grief, unresolved grief, which is, unresolved grief uh uh is undelivered communication of an emotional nature. So if you ever sit with yourself, if you ever sit with yourself and your thoughts, you ever have these conversations with somebody that maybe has hurt you, or somebody that's died, or you have these like random conversations. I don't have that anymore after I went through grief recovery. Some of you guys know this, but I went through a divorce 4 years ago, and the same year I went through the divorce, literally I was so dead set on healing myself real quick. And part of it was I didn't want to waste time anymore, and I had already felt like I wasted so much time, in time invested in that relationship, that I was just like, I do not want to waste time, and I do not want to be or be this bitter person. And I knew that if I didn't take care of things, that I would be that person, that I would be the person that I didn't want to be. And I wanted to come out of that situation better. And but unresolved grief is it's about the undelivered communication of an emotional nature. So I had a lot of that. A lot of us have a lot of things that we want to say to the people that hurt us, or to the things that happen in our life that that have caused us trauma and pain, and that's what unresolved grief is that undelivered communication of an emotional nature. And so and now I don't have those conversations. I used to have these conversations in my head with my ex-husband about things, and now I don't anymore, because of what I've gone through with grief recovery. And so anyways, I wanted to say that because you're right. No one teaches us what grief is. What is grief anyways? Like, what is grief? Grief is a normal and natural emotional reaction to a loss of any kind. That's what grief is. Grief is the conflicting feelings caused by an end of or change of a familiar pattern or of behavior. So it's something that you're used to, and then all of a sudden it changes. That's grief. Grief
So
is like, go ahead.
I want to stop you too, because I think what she said was really important. She very quickly wanted to do this because you recognize the bitterness could come in, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
and sadly, I know a lot of individuals where they were hurt and they will no longer, they are just so bitter towards the opposite sex.
Mm,
Hardened heart, kind of inner vows that we make, like, you know, people like that or whatever.
mm-hmm,
Um, but those bitter roots, man,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
those can really, really affect us for quite some time.
Yeah. And I just knew I needed to get through it and work through it. And luckily I had a friend who introduced me to Vicky Hagedorn. I sat down with Vicky Hagedorn in Austin. This was shortly after I was on top of a dome, wanting to commit suicide, wanting to jump off of on a valley floor in the Yosemite National Park. And I can talk more about that if you want.
I
You were
want
gonna,
you to take us back to, you know, I was at your wedding. I worked
yeah.
on you the night before your wedding, you know,
Mm-hmm,
and I think this is interesting too. As God wants me to share too. There's not only grief when a couple leaves each other, right? There's grief for the parents if kids
mm-hmm,
were involved. I
mm-hmm,
mean, there's so many dynamics of this. I don't know what you want to share for that. I
mm-hmm.
don't want to get, but I know there's a lot of hurt people from
Yeah.
the A, whatever. Um, I can't whisper it to you, but there's a lot of people in relationships that have been hurt because of mistrust that's come into the relationship,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Not all of them have ended in divorce,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm sure that healing and grief recovery can happen through that too. But
Absolutely.
to go from a woman who had made the decision and picked her partner, um,
Mm-hmm.
had the most beautiful wedding. I don't mean to trigger you
Yeah.
here, but just
No, I'm not triggered.
this is my life, the most
Mm-hmm.
amazing honeymoon
Mm-hmm.
possible,
Mm-hmm.
going off and then it not being that,
Mm-hmm.
not being what you thought.
Yeah.
Was there any grief before even you got divorced? Oh crap. Like,
Before I signed the papers,
um,
or before that.
that would be interesting too, because I remember you were a mess on your wedding night in your
Oh, I,
physical body.
oh, yeah. I mean, it was emotional. I waited for this man, um, I was thinking about a lot of things. Like my mom wasn't there, and um, just so there was a lot of obviously emotion with it, and so, um, but I'm not sure where you want me to go with this.
No, I like I just wanted you to address too that when people get in a relationship and they think it's going to be Cinderella and it's not, you know,
Well, it
like,
certainly wasn't for me. I mean, there were some really great moments, and then there were some really, really bad things. Um and I think, and again, I can only speak from my experience, and I'm choosing to be really careful with my words here. um I didn't realize, like, there were certain patterns in our relationship that I noticed, and I thought I need to get some help because I'm not feeling like I'm a really good wife. And so I went to I reached out to someone, and I got some counseling. And honestly, like there's some people right now that are in their marriage or in a relationship that they have noticed some patterns, and maybe just ignoring them. I did that for a minute, and then I realized, mainly because I wanted to better myself as a wife, and I reached out to someone. I got some help, and it was in that counseling session that I realized, I got on the phone, and I was asked, okay, what's going on? What can I help you with? And I was like, I don't know how to be a wife, a really good wife, and I need help. And they were like, well, tell me what's going on. So I did, and in that session, it was the first time that I realized, that I was in an abusive relationship, and so that was jarring, because I could easily see abuse in somebody else's relationship, but I couldn't see it in my own. And which made me go, this was my thought process. It made me go, okay, that's interesting. What about my past experience makes me think that this is okay? And I kind of had that question just floating, because it was so jarring for me to not realize that I was in an abusive relationship. I needed to get a counselor to tell me, that I was in an abusive relationship. And abuse doesn't have to be physical or sexual. It could be verbal. It could be emotional. It could even be spiritual. Let's throw that in there. You don't have to be hit to be in an abusive relationship, And so I had to really ask myself that, like, why did I think that this was okay? And what about me, or the things that I've gone, what is it that I hadn't dealt with that made me think that this was okay? And I had to just really dig deep. And so I did. And and I found the answer. The answer was I was physically abused by my school teacher when I was in, I don't know, when was it, fifth grade or something. I was like, maybe, I don't remember that. It was really young. I just remember him sticking me in a closet and hitting me in the back. I mean, I have marks in my back. I have a little like slash mark. Maybe you've noticed it. It's back there. And it was because of that abuse. And I was just like, wow. and so, sometimes the things that we're going through with other people have nothing to do with those people. And sometimes it has something to do with the past, and it's something that happened to you in the past and that made you think that it's okay. I never, ever outed my teacher for what he did. So there was this suffering and silence, thing that was in play too. And so, but it was, I just knew I needed to get some healing, and what can I do to heal so that I'm not attracted to or pulled into that kind of relationship, And so, and grief recovery, I mean, I know I keep talking about grief recovery, but that thing literally saved my life, along with other things. And so I, it really helped me. It helped me kind of clear some of the clutter and really get down to the root of things, and actually like kind of reconcile some of the things. Like, you don't need, and here's the thing, like, you don't need the person that hurt you to ask you for forgiveness, for them to be like, hey, I'm so sorry. That you don't need that for healing. You don't need any of that for healing. You can heal just fine without that. And so yeah, that was a lot that I just kind of spewed out there, but yeah, it was huh?
It was good.
So it was a question I had to ask myself, like, what about my past that made me think that, and that I couldn't even see it, that I couldn't even see that this was abuse, that I thought that I was the problem, which I'm not saying I wasn't, but
Stop there for a second.
yeah.
Someone out there is thinking, well, how could she even say that, right? Or in a situation where there's someone who's physically abusing the other person. What responsibility do we have? Like elaborate on when you say, I'm not saying I wasn't.
I say that because, there are some things that I needed to own in that relationship. Just like there were some things that my ex-husband needed to own, right? And so that's the part that I own. I own my own lack of whatever knowledge, understanding, reaction. You're only responsible for your own reaction. You're not responsible for the other person reaction or non-reaction. And so what I was doing up until that point was owning my stuff and his. That makes sense. So, and that's wrong. That's not healthy boundaries. That's not healthy for him. That's not healthy for you. Like,
is that codependency? Is that codependency, owning other people's stuff, taking responsibility for other people's stuff? Would you define that as codependent?
Maybe, probably. I never thought about it. Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, it's,
and then I'm going to dig a little deeper here.
Sure.
You said your brother, like were you always the responsible one? Were you always the one like having to take charge, you know what I mean? Take charge for others? Like, was there always that piece or that role that you took in your life?
In that moment when my mom needed a medical decision to happen, yeah, I think with, yeah, I would say probably, because even when Danny got sick, the kids, I was the one who took her to the hospital, doctor's appointments, and you were there. In a lot of ways tried to shield them from that weight of responsibility, because I knew what it felt like to really hold somebody's life in your hands, and to have to make that decision, and so that was intense. I don't even know, I don't think there is a word for that.
Wow. Now that I think back of it, you really were like, no, I'm driving her. No, I'm like, you were so intense. Like you didn't let your foot off the gas.
I think one night I did. And it was actually I came back that day, and it was the day that she got healed. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay, so let's go through your life. You and I, we connect in 2007.
Yeah.
This thing with Danny happens 2009 at the beginning of the year, the end of 2008, 2009. You're walking through healing. Then I see you again around 2015 2014, 2015. And
Mhm.
and you're like a new woman. And I remember
Mhm.
saying to you, like, wow, you're just so happy. And like, you
Mhm.
know, because you had gone through some healing. And I think both you and I have seen individuals, particularly in the Destiny Global First Steps to Success, Creating a Dynasty trainings, where people have had healings and like forgiveness
Mhm.
alone. I
Mhm.
remember watching Carrie, our friend Carrie, in 6 weeks drop 30 pounds just from the forgiveness work she did. And I've seen
Mhm.
that with other patients too. Like
Mhm.
it's crazy what
Yeah.
happens. But then, like you said, this compounding trauma happens.
Mhm.
And what causes you to be on, what is it, Dome Mountain, or you know what I mean,
Yeah.
wanting to take your life? Why did you want to take your life?
Uh, there was like a war of words in my head. Um, there was this feeling, this heavy feeling of um, uh, the pain of because at that point the divorce was I signed the papers, and feeling just this weight of responsibility, and um, that feeling of uh, this is just what I was feeling. Um, I'm kind of lived like this. But yeah, I have this public persona or whatever life, my you know glass glass house. Um, People know or think they know what they know about me. Um, Feeling like a utter failure. Um, uh, but just the really the I mean, it was a convergence of all these feelings. Honestly, like it just kind of just all like a freight train just came. Feeling of shame and scorn and rejection and failure and self hate. The feeling of not being good enough, not being enough. The feeling of um, uh, can anybody relate to any of these feelings? Just curious. The feeling of the pain not ending. It was kind of like, and this is the best way to it. It felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest, and just camped out on my chest, and then it also felt like I jumped out of a plane. If anybody knows what it feels like to jump out of a plane, there's this moment of just free fall. There's no the parachute hasn't popped open, so you're just falling, and it's scary and thrilling, but for me mostly scary. I jumped out of a plane when I went to Australia, and that was scary. That part was so scary, and it was just that non-stop free fall. Like there was no parachute, there was no landing. It was just unending, and I just wanted it to stop. At that moment I just wanted it to stop. And luckily a friend of mine was there, and this was the phrase that she and I haven't shared this to many people, but this was a phrase that she told me. She was like, "Are you ready to go, sissy?
Mm.
And are you ready to go, sissy?" And at that point, I was ready to jump off that dome. I got up from the rock, and if you ever been to Yosemite, it's Sentinel Dome. You could see Half Dome. You could see, well, you there's a valley floor, like it's just way up high, probably 1,000. I don't know, a couple thousand feet high, and I just wanted it to stop, and I wanted to stop that feeling of just feeling like I was suffocating, and when she said that, are you ready to go, sissy? It almost felt like Like, are you ready to get walk from off the rock, or are you ready to jump off the rock? you know? And I just took one look at her and just because I only heard it. I got up and heard her say that, and then I for it felt like an eternity, just sat there and just thought about all these things, all the feelings, all the torment, the head, like the war of words in my head, all the accusations, everything was just converging in that moment. And I just looked at her and I broke, and I couldn't, it was just like I was hyperventilating. I was a mess. I was just like gasping for air as I was trying to communicate what was going on. And she was just there. And I'm so glad she was there. So
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
and people don't, I'm gonna say this, and I told Vicky, my friend, who has walked me through grief recovery. People go, well, why do people, like, I don't understand why people want to commit suicide, and it's just like, that is the last thing you want to say. That is the last thing you want to say to someone is that, because it's deep pain, it's deep torment, it's the war. I call it the war of the war of words in the head. It's the last thing you want to say is, I don't really understand why people want to commit suicide, or why they want to end their life. This is like, you're right, you don't understand, and I'm going to ask respectfully that you don't speak on it. Because it's almost self-righteous to think, I would never do that. I would never want to do that. And there are people right now, even on this call right now, thinking those thoughts. And I'm going to say, I get it. I totally get it. But to say, I don't really understand why, you're right, you don't. You don't, and you shouldn't speak on it. So it's deep pain, it's deep torment, it's the words, it's every feeling, every ounce of just like, my life is over. Like, or I just want it to stop. For me, it was, I just want the pain to stop. It was, I was way in over my head.
And I think from a practitioner sense too, there's other things you can do to numb the pain, right?
Absolutely.
A lot of alcoholics, in
Yep.
just my perspective, I think even SSRIs and antidepressants, because you can't feel as much. But what you're gonna share and how you recovered and went through grief has allowed you, like, if you hadn't done this work, where would your life be? And I think we've discussed it too, like when you came out as a composer during
the pandemic,
2020, the pandemic, like, and that's a grief in itself too. I think a lot of people are grieving their own life.
Yeah.
Huge. Like, you would not have the success you have today, learned this amazing, beautiful, man, all your music is incredible. I wish we could play some on here too. Maybe we can, with your permission, splice it into the end or something.
Sure.
The recording. Awesome. All right. Sure. So take us through. So your friend is there. You come off of the mountain, and
I'm a mess with my sunglasses. Put my sunglasses on. it wasn't just her and I. There was I was in the middle of leading a group through, the mountains, and this was the worst timing of all. I was a mess. I couldn't even lead that day. I just was I I I came down the mountain crying. I went to Bridal Veil Fall. Which is hilarious that it's called Bridal Veil, but that's where we went. And I kind of felt like I needed to just wash myself from all of that, the convergence of all the thoughts, because they were still raging. I mean, it didn't just end because I walked off that dome. Like, they were raging at me. Like, it was just like this nonstop. And I remember going to the waterfall, and as close as I could without killing myself, because it's intense. It was intense during that time, the water. And I just kind of washed myself from all of that, and I cried myself to sleep that night. I shared with the ladies what was going on with me, and what I was dealing with. It ended up being one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had with a group of people. And but then shortly after that trip, I drove to Texas, and I sat down with Vicky Hagedorn, and um, I wanted to understand what went wrong, where it went wrong, where my marriage went wrong, uh, how I could heal from it. And so my friend told me about grief recovery, and so I sat down with Vicky, because she had done grief recovery with Vicky, and so I sat with her, and we had a really great conversation, and I was very candid. And she helped me navigate through a lot of things that, right, like, this day makes a lot of sense. And then going through, carving out 12 weeks. I think it took us about 12 weeks of life to go through this. I didn't travel. I didn't go anywhere. I just kind of hunkered down and just said, okay, I'm committed to this. I need to work through this. Absolutely need to work through this. And yeah,
so I want
she
to
helped
stop
me.
you there. I want to stop you
Yeah.
there because, I think that's a common thing. And we all have different personalities and stuff, but I see, I have women or people in my life who've been through so much, but they won't
Mhm.
stop to deal. They'll just keep busy, keep busy, keep busy. Maybe I'm talking about myself. I don't know. But
Yeah.
but that we don't think about taking a sabbatical, a rest, a period of time to do healing work. Like, oh, I'll just do it on the side, or I'll just show up Sunday night,
Right.
like not carving out the time. Like, oh yeah, I can go to a class, but do we even carve out time to process what
No, I
we
mean, most
learn?
of us don't, because it actually means sitting down with our thoughts. And some people can't even do that. Some people can't even sit down with their thoughts. Their thoughts are so intense and so scary that they're constantly on the phone, uh, watching, something, a show or whatever, anything to avoid sitting down with our thoughts and what's really going on the inside. And it's hard. It's not easy it takes courage. It takes so much courage. And we all have courage inside of us to walk through for the healing on the other side. And it's there for us. It's there for us, for all of us. And so, and
But
just because you're grieving doesn't mean you're broken.
mm, say that again.
Just because you're grieving doesn't mean you're broken.
Even if it's been a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades,
It doesn't mean you're broken.
or you're crazy, or you're anything.
Yeah. And if we don't heal, if we don't ever heal from the thing that hurt us, what ends up happening is we start bleeding on other people that never hurt us.
Explain.
So I'm a better person today than I was 4 years ago. I'm more open. I just see life and people very different these days. And that is because of the healing. When you heal your wounds, when you heal, you become more self-aware. You become, there's emotional intelligence that comes into play. When you quickly make things right, it's that saying, people hurt people because they're hurting,
Mm-hmm.
And the world is hurting right now. And so I don't know, I just see people and things and life way more different than I ever have now because of the healing. And I'm still healing, guys. Like, this isn't just like, oh, well, she's arrived. I have not arrived. I still have many, many, many grafts that I need to do. And you when you get into grief recovery, you'll understand what that is. But there's, I still have quite a bit to do. And but man, I can honestly say that I'm a better person.
Yeah.
Better for what I've gone through because of the things that I've had to walk through,
That's
working through the
huge.
muck.
That's huge. Say
So
that again. I am a better person for the things that I've had to walk through.
yeah. And and there is healing. Like, I remember when I sat down with Vicky about this, and doing grief recovery, I was just like, I don't know. And even in the middle of it, I was just like, just feeling, it was hard. It was so hard. But it's harder living with a broken heart. So much more harder living with a broken heart. So much more harder living with that big fat elephant sitting on your chest where you don't feel like you can even breathe. Like, that passage in the Bible, let's throw this out there because it just came to me, where it says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." That word mourn is breathe again. Blessed are those who breathe again, for they will be comforted. And so when I think of that, I think of this heavy weight, just on your chest where you can't even breathe, and you're literally trying to gasp for air. And when you get through the other side, you breathe deeply again, and it's clear, and you're not like hacking a lung, or trying really hard to get air. And so, but it's possible.
I will tell you, like, and we've had this conversation, like, wow, you're back. Your lungs are, your ribs are so good. You're like, but that's not just you. I see that in others as they go through healing work, just literal transformations of their body. Their body gets years younger. Their joints are so less restricted when that anxiety and that stress, like the shallow breathing, like they can breathe again. It's just amazing. We have lots of people who want to get some clarity on grief recovery, and then who Vicky is, and how to access her too. So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So some of you may or may not be familiar with the Grief Recovery Handbook. This handbook, the action program for moving beyond death, divorce, or other losses, including health, career, and faith. Um, and this has been updated how grief recovery addresses trauma and PTSD.
Yeah.
This is the 20th anniversary of this handbook. This is not a book you just read. This is a program that you
Mhm.
walk through. Like Isa was saying, you make these timelines. I'm going to let you speak more about it because you're more you've done more of this than I have.
Sure, sure. Um, I'm actually looking for I'm gonna post if I'm gonna post the link for the book.
Karen, I think, has it too. She may be able to do that.
Oh, on the chat, in the chat.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah, I'll
Because
post
people are
it.
asking about the okay, cool. Yeah, so grief recovery. So if all you do when you're done with this call is order that book and walk through it, walk through the steps in that book, that, I mean, the fact that you're even here is awesome. Number one, because this is a tough topic to talk about and to hash out, and it's not easy. And yeah, it's very difficult to speak on these things, even for me. Like I have no shame. I have nothing to hide about anything. But this is a difficult topic to tackle and to talk about. So I applaud you for even showing up. And so if all you do at the end of this is get that book, that would be awesome, and go through it. You can message me on Instagram or Facebook and let me know that you got the book and that you're going through it. And if you need someone to like just cheer you on, I'll be your cheerleader. It's not easy. If you're at a point where you're ready to just go dive in and you're like, man, I need to, because this was me after my Yosemite deal. I was just like, I need to get my stuff together. Like, because it's not enough to go off and hike into nature, because that's what, I love nature because it really is a healing thing for me. And one of my favorite places to go is the desert, because it's just there's something about the desert that really speaks to me. And but that is not enough to heal my heart, what's in here, right? Time, this might sound controversial, but this is what I believe. Time does not heal. Time does not heal. Action does.
Ooh,
what you do today, the decision you make to heal yourself, to be a better person, to not carry all this grief and loss. And listen, I know what it is to lose a loved one. I know what it is to be divorced, to lose a pet, and life went on after my divorce. And there were other traumatic things that happened after my divorce. Mm-hmm. And don't you know, I was so glad that I had grief recovery, the stuff that the tools and things that were in that book that helped me work through some of the stuff that happened in 2020, 21, 22. Because life goes on, and things, it's life, and you never know what's going to throw at you. And better to have the tools to walk through this stuff than to not have it. And so, but if you're ready like me, this is where I was going. Vicki is available. Vicki Hagedorn she's been doing this for 20 years. That woman has been sober for 20 plus years. She's an amazing woman. I would not recommend her if I didn't know her and trust her. She helped me walk through my divorce, the first time going through grief recovery. She's available, and we'll put a link up and information and all that for you guys to to get that from her. But
I have
go
a
ahead.
question. So,
Sure.
first step, get the book, right? I like to have it on Audible and read and
Absolutely.
listen at the same time. I think that's a very powerful step. But there's these steps you have to take, and preferably you do this with a partner. Um,
Preferably.
preferably. Don't have to, but preferably.
Yes.
The classes that you see at a lot of churches called recovery, isn't that
Mhm.
based on this book as well?
I have no idea, Mary,
Oh, does anyone out there know?
because they call it like it's grief recovery. It's not just recovery.
Okay.
So I'm gonna say no.
Okay.
I wouldn't understand why someone would call it recovery and not grief recovery. So yeah,
Celebrate recovery. There's celebrate recovery. Okay, so it's not the same. And celebrate
I
recovery
don't
is
think it
not
is.
necessarily grief.
And it's more geared towards addiction and other recovery things, not grief.
Okay. Okay. So something very different. And then Vicky has been a grief recovery
She's
specialist.
certified in it. Yes, she's certified.
Okay.
She's a certified specialist, and she knows her thing. And she's gone through all the required, uh, certification to do that. And she's amazing, and she's available. Although, just recently I posted I posted a post on my social media, and I recommended her, and so she's definitely, she has several clients now. It's so funny. I was like, hey, when can we talk? I was like, well, but she's available. Reach out to her. Well, I'm sure we'll put her information up, that if you need to reach out to me, you can too.
Yeah. And then maybe you have someone in your life who wants to walk through this too. I know one of our coaches, Danny, would encourage us, to get a partner and go through this. And they teach you in the book too, how to
Mhm.
walk through with someone
Mhm.
too. You just got to follow directions. That's the biggest thing there.
Mhm.
Let me see. I wrote down a couple things. Man, I just think back. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I
Go
just
ahead.
think back to two times, I think back to that young woman who was going through so much, like when I first met you, and you're, just this wall that was around you, and watching you heal and get better, and then being in these highs of your life. And then I remember we were like walking on a mountain, or we're walking outside.
Mm.
We walked outside for like 45 minutes. It was cold, and you just, sharing that story of what was going on in your life.
Mhm.
And, the low, being there in that low point. And I said this to you the other day. It's like, man, it's so awesome to see you so free, to see it as you, a friend, but to see it in your art. Um,
Mhm.
and what's interesting too, he says, as you've through these
Mhm.
years, even before your divorce, like these new artistic things came into your life, like photography. Like, we got to show some
Mhm.
people some of your photography,
Mhm.
maybe in the recording too, because like just all of this kind of just poured out of you, and you actually left a very good job to
Mhm.
pursue, these gifts and talents that you had. Like,
Mhm.
would any of that been possible without working on you?
I mean, I think, I didn't just start working on me 4 years ago. I've been working on me since college. It feels like a lifetime of work, but trauma is trauma, and it could be it's mounting, and if we're not dealing with the trauma, it just becomes this huge compound compounded mountain of grief, and so um I do want to say this, because somebody mentioned it, that it's uh grief recovery actually has helped people with addiction as well. Just FYI, because the addiction is just it's a symptom of what's really going on the inside. Like, and so grief recovery has helped in that regard. But yeah, going back to what you were saying, like it's been a journey for me. Like it's not just, it didn't just start 4 years ago when my marriage was uh was a mess. And so yeah, I think absolutely. I think honestly, I think I am more who I really am today, more true to myself today than I was 4 years ago. I'm doing things that I absolutely like love, and that is composing music and creating music, um and doing it for like stories, and which is quite the leap from what I was doing prior to that. But I feel it is more true to who I really am. And so, yeah.
Speaking of that too, give your Instagram handle, because you really have come out as on Instagram, and you share it's just, it's neat to follow you.
Mm-hmm.
um and to see where you are, what you're doing. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's beautiful. It's really beautiful, from my perspective too, to see such a closed woman 15 years ago to this woman who shares
Yeah,
her heart, shares her opinion, share,
I do.
that yeah,
I do. I do. I do. I do
share
share my
some of,
opinion.
shares your music too. Like,
Yeah,
Karen, do we have her music?
that's hilarious.
Yeah, I
Shares
can
her
do that.
opinion.
Can we post that in the chat too? And then we'll post it in the, so Instagram.com, Isa _agape. Tell us about Agape before we close.
Oh man.
Tell us about Agape.
When Danny was sick, she we had some really, really interesting conversations, and one day I was just kind of like, we're at a doctor's office or something, and I said, no, we were at her house actually. She was kind of laying down, and I said, I wouldn't mind a middle name, because all her kids have middle names, and I consider myself one of her kids. And she was like, really? Like, yeah, would you give me a middle name? And then, but maybe like a day or two later, she gave me Agape, and she said, it's just who you are. You're, you love unconditionally. And I think, like, just in that time of me taking care of her, like, it just kind of resounded. So yeah.
So awesome. Very cool. Very, very cool. Love this story. So is there anything else you want to share before we close up?
I'm wondering if anybody has any questions. If we want, I'm down with, a couple questions here or there.
Oh, Karen, if you see anything,
if you have a question, just drop it in the chat, maybe.
how do we spell Vicky's last name?
Hagedorn, Hadadorn. Her website is Freedom from Grief.
HAD or G?
Her website is Freedom from Grief, and I'm gonna write her full name.
Okay.
Hagedorn.
Thank you.
So broken and brokenhearted are different, right? Yes. Lori, I saw your question. Those are, I believe, two different things. And yeah. just because your heart is broken doesn't mean that you are broken.
Okay. I think I see. How do you know if you have or have not dealt with all your grief?
Uh, a really good first thing that comes to mind, because I'm not a psychologist, like I said, is if you take a 2 situation and you blow it up to a 10, that's a good indication that there's something underlying, like underneath, like that's kind of just brewing, but like not quite in the surface, but just kind of just brewing, and it just pops up. Ask me the question again. Maybe something else will pop up again for me.
How do you
I
know
don't know
if you have or have not dealt with all your grief?
I mean, I haven't dealt with all my grief, and I feel like I feel so good right now. But
What about peace?
I feel like you'll be dealing with grief for the rest of your life. I don't think that there's like an end to it necessarily. I think, you know, we all could use a dose of some grief recovery, you know. And when you take the class, when you go through it, there, you know, there's a couple things that it'll tell you to do, and that one of them is creating a like graph of a person, of a relationship. And because the pain that I was going through at the time was so about my marriage, I grafted my marriage. But really graphing your mom and your dad, those 2 figures in your life, because they're so foundational to who you are, and you know, the obviously growing up, like that's what I would tackle for sure. So I mean, that's a tough question, because it just is like, you know.
Laura Lee says, I'd imagine going through the program like grief recovery would help you to know what has been processed, what hasn't, like an onion, one layer at a time.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I mean, it's not the same, but it is like forgiveness. I mean, we're told that it's always going to be a process. Like it's for as long as we're alive to forgive. And
yeah. I feel like life seems more manageable.
I think, at least from the conversation a little bit, I think she has gone through the grief recovery. Excellent.
Being abused, also situations 2 to 10. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
I'm sure there'll be more as more and more people watch this recording and start to connect with you. One of the things in my own healing process and forgiveness process is Isa has some really amazing music. She's a singer-songwriter. Now she's a composer. And I was telling her the other day, like, I just want to listen to this track over and over. It's just so beautiful. You know, you composed this based on like a funeral, right? Wasn't it the loss of a police officer or something?
Yeah, I have a online newsletter, and I release music every month, and this month I released a track that was kind of and I hate to use the word inspired, but I wrote it after I read a post on Instagram about a 22-year-old police officer who died in the line of duty, and the images of that of the funeral, where the NYPD filled the streets of New York City. It was quite the scene. Never seen anything like it. And but the image that really rocked me was of his wife, and she was holding tightly to a flag, and she had her head down, and yeah. And so I read that story and saw those images and wrote a piece, and yeah. So that was this month's track.
And we can all listen to that for free if we get on Isa's newsletter that is available at
It's terranova.substack.com.
send that to me earlier because Karen could put it up if you send it.
Yeah, I did. I sent it to you via
Marco Polo.
Marco Polo. Yep.
Okay.
But and it's free. There's a link. Oh, there it is. Thank you, Karen. And it's called Terra Nova because I honestly, like, this is why I say I feel more myself now more than ever than before. I music for me, like I kind of want a little bit of ambiguity, like, and so I came up with the word Terra Nova, new land, because it feels like that's where I'm at right now, just overall in my life. Like I feel like I'm on new land, and so that's why it's called Terra Nova.
I love it. I love it.
But yeah,
for those of you who don't know, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So those of you who don't, I didn't know what a composer was. Isa had to teach me. So you watch Manifest. Any Manifest fans out there? Or anyways, Isa's favorite show. She single-handedly saved that show, if you like Manifest, and brought it back for another season. Brought it back for another season. But anyway, the music in the background when you're watching, that gives you the suspense or the emotion when you're watching film, media, whatever, is that emotion that you feel. I'm sorry, Isa, I'm thinking about that contest. Anyway, that Super Mario's. It's an inside joke. Sorry, don't do that. But anyway, your music's just beautiful. And how do they get a hold of your singing music that you have out there?
It's on Spotify. You can go on my website, isaagape.com. It's on there as well. You could purchase it there, or you can get on Spotify or iTunes. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for having this deep conversation that has really set so many people free. I know it already. I'm getting messages about it already. And we just thank you. And remember, we're not here to we're not therapists or anything like that, but we're here to provide resources. And that's, as the Total Wellness Doc, wellness is physical, emotional, spiritual, relational, financial. I mean, the list goes on. That's what we're about. And our Total Wellness community, we have speakers like this every month, different topics on wellness. We hope you'll join us there too. On the website, I am the Total Wellness Doc, doc.com. And Isa, God's telling me you got one more thing to say. I don't know what it is. One more thing.
Do I?
Yeah.
Or
share. I don't know.
Yeah, I just just trying to think, like, there's a couple things. um, the whole time doesn't heal, action does. Um, and and yeah, so I'm yeah, I hope this has helped someone. Even if it's helped, if it helps one person, I would have uh done a good job there. But yeah, I reach out to me on the socials. I'm mainly on Instagram, but I'll pop into Facebook every now and again. But what would be really, 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 really cool is if you went to terranova.substack.com and just like join the list and listen to the music. That would be really cool because that's a big passion of mine. I'm I just finished wrapping a short film, producing a short film with some friends, um, and so I'll be sending out some sort of update on that when it releases. We're submitting it to film festivals, so hopefully hopefully it gets picked up. But and I wrote the music for the short, and I'm really excited about those kind of things that are happening. But I am passionate about seeing people really get healed, because now that I'm on the other side of that particular situation with my marriage, like I feel like there's so much hope, and right, like these days there's just it
We
could
need
the hope could be very dim. But there's hope for our hearts to be healed and to be better, and to enjoy life, and to have the tools that when life throws us a few lemons, and we have tools to work through the hard stuff. So yeah,
absolutely.
that's all.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Isa. Thank you for joining us, and look forward
Thank you for
to,
having me.
yeah, to hearing more of
Yeah.
your music. And I don't think this is the end of Isa's stories to share. So,
Cool.
bye, everyone.